Welcome to this video, which is going to be about the PTS changes of update 8.3, in particular about the biggest change coming to healers, and that's the changes to Pearls of Ehlnofey. The changes are Pearls of Ehlnofey. This set now grants 3 ultimate when you attempt to cast an ability that consumes resources while under 50% of your dominant resource, rather than 5 ultimate while under 30% of that resource. That was done to make this set more widely available to use while peeling back some of the raw power from this set. This change I actually suggested myself quite recently when we were talking about predictions for the future coming year. That a fact that I could predict this change should also tell you that this change is basically the Regina George of balance changes. It was very predictable and we all kind of knew this change was coming in some variation. I think Pearls in its current lifesaver form is a bit too powerful, so I don't actually mind the nerf too much. A good healer getting 3.5 ult per second of this item is going to be able to proc Pillager's Prophet at 400 ult on cooldown. While this is not necessarily a Pearls specific problem, this could be fixed by nerfing Pillager. I think Pearls of Ehlnofey were a bit overtuned, so nerfing it kind of had it coming. Pillager's takes 400 divided by 45, about 8.9 ult per second to max out. Current in the game, we have these sources of regen. We have 3 base regen, we have 5 from Pearls, 0.66 from Minor Heroism, 0.44 from Catalyst, 0.5 from Transfer, and then we have a non-discrete amount from Decisive, which I'm going to estimate is roughly 0.7 here. This is a very conservative estimate. We put these numbers together: 3.5 plus 5 plus 0.66 plus 0.44 plus 0.5 plus 0.7, and we find that we roughly get 10.3 ult per second. So if we just imagine for a second that all our other sources than Pearls are at 100%, so everything else we get full uptime of, then it requires about 0.72 cast per second of Pearls, or around 7 out of 10 of your total cast, assuming 1 action per second. This is not a perfect uptime at the moment. This also assumes that you're casting Pillages on cooldown. But I think what is much more interesting currently in the game is the equation itself. So the bigger number here is the 5. It represents almost half your ultimate regen at full uptime. So looking at this equation, knowing this equation, and deciding on what build choice you should make, you would be insane not to build to optimize around heights, having as high an uptime on Pearls as possible. But if we take a look at the new equation, now the 5 turns into a 3. What it's telling is, first of all, we're only getting 8.3 ult per second, so it's actually not possible to get Pearls uptimes only having these sources of regen. Pearls also represents less of your overall ultimate sustain, and this is a good thing, I think, because it might make it more viable to go for builds not using it, and it also opens up for new build choices, such as using potion cooldown glyphs or maybe race changing to get that final 0.6 ult per second. Overall, I think this makes build diversity better, and I think if there's something we need in the game right now, it's not so much raw power. We don't really care about getting nerfed. What we actually want is just more build diversity, so we can play in more ways, and there being several viable ways to play and not just one. The catch here is that this does not help with class diversity, as this just segments the Nightblade as the only viable Pillager's healer, except for maybe the Necromancer, and I think this is a big oversight by Source. This is something they missed. The Nightblade healer was already meta, now it's just segmented in as the only viable choice to have Pillagers on. I also think Source has missed the mark with the balancing here. Balancing for raising the floor and lowering the ceiling is nothing new. It's something Source has been doing for years, and they've not been very successful, I would say. But I think most people or most players in in-game are fine with this. This is sort of the thing we've had for years, And while not everyone agrees with it, I think most people are fine with it. But I think this change sort of misses when it comes to balance theory, because it didn't lower the ceiling. What it did was it just put a big concrete slab on top of it and basically hard capped the ceiling. So there's just a hard cap, and I don't think hard capping player skill is a very good way of going about balancing. There are sort of three ways that player skill increases. So at first, new player, like if you imagine player power, increases exponentially. And this is present in every MMO, specifically in the tier of gear system. So imagine a player in legendary gear with set bonuses has exponentially more damage or power than a player in blue gear without them. It's also present in the champion point system in ESO. Next, once a player is no longer a new player and they've sort of got the grip of the game, their power goes up linearly for a long time. And this basically has a sort of effort to success ratio where a player might put in 10% more time every week practicing their rotation. They will experience about a 10% increase in DPS. And then once we're no longer in the mid game, we have this tiny, small end game community that don't touch grass. Their gains don't increase linearly, their gains increase logarithmically. So the more they invest, the less they gain. And this is often done in games with diminishing returns. Diminishing returns are literally just logarithmically increasing returns. In ESO, it happens quite naturally, as damage buffs don't increase on themselves, they are additive, as well as there is a maximum potential you can get from 1 second global cooldown. But I want to stress here that a logarithmic function never actually hits 0. There is no cap to it. It moves towards 0, but it doesn't hit it. But that's what's happening here. And here there is a hard cap on player skill. A player that can keep all pearls under 30% is going to get the same result as one keeping it up just under 50%. And this is why I came up with what I think is a better system for pearls. One that brings in more players, as Source wants to, and I think most people would agree is a good thing, but still lets healers optimize their performance and keeps the Pearls minigame alive, because the Pearls minigame was quite popular and is quite fun. And my suggestion is as follows. You get 0.1 ultimate per 2% missing resources, starting at 50%. Now this is a dynamic return on ult, so the lower you go in resources, the more you gain in ultimate. Now the increments can be changed a little bit, but I think this function is pretty much perfect. The beginning ultimate gain is a little lower at 50%, but the type of player casting in the 30 to 50% range will average out at about 3 or more ult per cast. At 30%, the gain is 3.5, so it's less than the 5 that we're getting now. So this item is still nerfed for players who were playing perfectly before, and I think this is a good thing because it was overtuned. But this allows players to still apply the skill they've learned, while also being useful to the players who are fine getting around those 3 ult per second mark. It also means that no matter how small the difference, the player putting in the most effort will achieve the better result. And the extra ult game comes with massive diminished returns, and therefore it works structurally with how balance is achieved. I also think thematically, with pearls being a risk reward kind of item, that getting more reward for more risk makes sense. My last point in this video is about what I read from this change, what I took from it. And I think it's actually positive for healers. What I think Sauce is doing here is actually preparing for a new mythic item. It makes sense to reel in the stable mythic that is a bit overtuned in order to be able to introduce a new item that I can actually compete. If Pearls was kept at its current level, then a new item would need to be even more overtuned. By reeling in Pearls, Sauce gets more options in what sort of mythic they can introduce, and it gets to actually come into the game at a healthy stage where it doesn't introduce even more power creep than we already have. Now, I might have completely missed the point here, but this is what seems to be happening. Now, Hermaris Mora, Theme Mythics, could thematically match with the healer role as well, so I think this is what is happening. It might not come with the chapter, but I think it might come later in the year when they introduce a new set of mythics.